Thank you, His Excellency, for granting us this interview. I'd like to start with the relationship between the two countries. There has been a long relationship between Denmark and Myanmar since, I think, 1955. How do you describe this relationship? I think at some point it has not been really good between the two countries. How do you describe the relationship?
Well, I mean, we established diplomatic relations in 1955, so it's 61 years we are celebrating this year. I think we have had overall for a long period very good relations. We provided quite a lot of support for Myanmar's development. Then of course there was a change of political system in Myanmar, which meant that it was very difficult for us to work with Myanmar. There was an incident with our Consul General, as you are aware, who were taken to prison and died in prison. But this is quite a few years ago. After the opening up in 2011, of course, we are now strengthening our collaboration with Myanmar. Myanmar has become a priority country for Danish development assistance, and we opened the embassy in 2014.
So that was the reason that you opened an embassy in Yangon in 2014 to accelerate the relationship.
I think there were a number of reasons for that. I think first of all we wanted also through this to show our support for the democratization and reform process in Myanmar, and we thought that this would be a better way of doing it with having a presence here. We also, as I said, made Myanmar a priority country for our development assistance. And then in the longer term, we certainly also hope that Danish and Myanmar businesses will increase their cooperation.
You mentioned about developmental projects and business as to what are the other key areas of relationship between the two countries?
I mean, development cooperation is very important, and we have had that, as I said, in the past, and now Myanmar is a priority country. But I think there are many other relations. Actually, a lot of people from Chin State are living in Denmark.
Yes.
And that, of course, had to do with the relationship between the Protestants in Chin and in Denmark. But also culturally, we are trying to increase collaboration between, Danish artists and Myanmar artists. So we are broadening our collaboration, but also very important our political cooperation and increasingly our commercial collaboration.
Yeah, you served as ambassador in Vietnam for years, and then you have seen the transition in Myanmar. What is your views? What are your views on transition to democracy in Myanmar?
Well, I mean, if you take from 2011 up till today, I think a lot has happened. If you, for example, look at the media, which is, in my view, relatively free now. If you look at civil society, it's much more space now than there was before, and there are many other areas where one can see that progress has been achieved. But of course there is still a long way to go, but progress has certainly been made.
Well, when you say there are a lot needs to be done, how about the issue of, like, for example, civil-military relationship between the military and the new government?
Well, I mean, the fact here is that you have a constitution which ensures certain rights to the military. For example, as you know, 25% of all parliamentary seats, that the military appoints a number of ministers. So in that respect, of course, the relationship between an elected government and the military is different from most other democracies. And of course, this is a process. But I think what is, from my point of view, very, very important is that the elections went, I would say, very well, that the incoming government got a very clear mandate from the people, and I think when they come in with the strength of the mandate of the people. The people wanted change, they wanted a new government, and I think this is a very strong position for the new government to start from.
We will see a new government soon led by Nationally for Democracy. In your view, what are the main hurdles for the new government?
Well, let me start by saying the expectations from the people of Myanmar are very high. They want new jobs, they want a much better education system, they want a better health system, they want better human rights, better respect, they want a justice system which is fair, and I could go on. So the challenges are, of course, enormous. And I think everybody has to realize that you cannot solve all the challenges overnight. This is a process, it will take time. But as I said, the incoming government of the NLD has the mandate of the people.
Yeah. What could be the concrete offer from the Danish government to the new government in terms of handling or facing these challenges?
Well, I mean, we are preparing a 5-year program for development cooperation, which we will finalize probably or before the end of this year, where we will focus our support on a number of areas. You will not be surprised to hear that we will support the peace. We already have given support for the Joint Peace Fund, which has been established by a number of donors, and we plan to continue that support. We would also very much discuss with the new government how we can assist in developing rule of law and respect for human rights. And that, of course, involves basically the whole justice system. You know, how can you introduce reforms in the justice system? So for us, this is a very important area. Also, how can you provide legal aid to the people who need legal aid? How can you empower lawyers and others to be able to deal with and engage in reform of the justice sector, and also in improvement in human rights. Another area which of course is very important is the whole issue of job creation. We are planning to establish a fund which can give support to small and medium-sized enterprises all over Myanmar, whereby we can assist them in improving energy efficiency, deal with waste management, improve occupational safety and health, in order for them to be able also eventually to attract investors from outside and also be able to export their own products to Europe, maybe even to Denmark. So again, this should hopefully also create employment, because if you look at Myanmar's economy, it is very much driven now by big companies. But if you want to have sustainable growth, if you want to have inclusive growth, you have to deal and support the small and medium-sized enterprises. Another area where we are planning to support is also to improve the statistical evidence. If you look at the knowledge, for example, about small and medium-sized companies, it's rather limited what you really know, what makes them grow, what are the obstacles for them to grow, and there we will plan to work together with the Central Statistical Organization to be able to get proper evidence so that the politicians can make decisions on policies based on evidence. And then we also planning to support co-management in coastal fisheries. There are about 4 million people who depend on fisheries, and the fact is that the resources are going down, and that unless they find a way to manage the fishing resources, many of these people will become poorer and poorer. So what we would like to do, and what we are discussing, is to introduce co-management, which means that the local communities will be able themselves to take responsibility for managing the fishing resources, of course with the support of the Department of Fisheries.
So there will be direct support to the new government as well?
Absolutely. And I just want to mention the last area, which is basic education, where we certainly also wish to assist the new government in improving access and quality of education, both in the formal system, but also in the areas which are not covered by the formal system. But we certainly want to engage directly with the new government. Of course, will be a period where you gradually move into more and more collaboration with the government. But it is very clear to us that this is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. I'd like to go more in details into the peace process. We know that there has been peace process has been going on for the last 4-5 years, and Denmark was involved. Denmark was supporting the peace process. Can you elaborate more details or elaborate more about the role of the Denmark in the peace process and what you would like to do under the new government?
Well, I think for me, also based on my experiences from South Africa, Nepal, and other places, is that the peace process has to be run by Myanmar. Foreigners cannot make peace in Myanmar. It's only the people of Myanmar who can do that. So I think whatever we are doing is facilitating what the actors in Myanmar decide to do. And for me, this is a very, very fundamental principle, that this is the actors. They are the ones who have to agree, because they are the ones who have to live with the peace. And I think for us, we can help, assist, providing necessary financial and technical support to the extent that this is what the parties want. But it has to be an internal process.
Yeah. How about the role of civil society groups in this transition to democracy in Myanmar? How do you view that?
Well, I think civil society is very much part of the peace process. Now, how this unfolds, I think, depends on each individual area where you actually have conflict. Again, you cannot have one size fit everything. I think you have to look at what are the possibilities at the local level. But I'm sure, and I think the local communities, they have an important role to play. They also have an important role to play when they tell, whether it's the armed groups or the government now, we want peace.
Yeah. How about the interest of Danish companies in investing in Myanmar? Is there any much interest for them to come and invest in Myanmar?
Well, we have one big Danish company who already has invested here, Carlsberg. They are even brewing local beer here, Yoma beer and Carlsberg and Tuborg. So they came in very early. We have Maersk, who is also a big shipping company, is here. Arla, who is producing cheese and milk powder, etc., is here. There are a number of smaller companies, but I think it's fair to say that more generally, it's still very much wait and see. How will the transition unfold now? and what will be the policies of the new government. It is so we very much hope that the new government will see an interest, and I believe it will, in attracting responsible foreign investments and collaboration between, in this case, Danish and Myanmar companies.
Yeah. What could be the concerns of these Danish business groups when they come to countries like Myanmar? What Myanmar could do to attract them?
I think stability is very important, and ensuring that things are moving in the right direction when it comes to the whole reform and democratization process. But it's also to ensure that the legislation is in place, that there is fair deal for foreigners and not restrictions which only apply to certain groups of companies, etc. So I think a level playing field is very important for foreign companies.
Yeah. What could be your expectations from the new government when you want to increase the, for example, bilateral trade or the FDI of Danish companies, Danish groups coming to Myanmar? What could be your expectations?
Well, I certainly hope that, and I'm sure that the new government will want to see Myanmar grow. And I would say hopefully even with higher growth rates than has been happening in the past, where they have been quite big, because this is really in Myanmar's interest to increase your gross national product, and in a way so that this will benefit all the people of Myanmar. And I think it's fair to say that, for example, Danish companies are very much aware of the need to ensure corporate social responsibility, good working conditions, etc., etc. So I think it will benefit Myanmar with increased investment.
If you put a target, what could be a kind of a target you would like to put for bilateral trade between the two countries in next 5 years?
I don't want to predict that. I think this is.
But you like to increase it. Yeah.
It is important. We would very much like to see more Danish companies engaged in Myanmar, but certainly also Myanmar companies coming to Denmark and see how can we, increase our collaboration. We hope that we will be able also to facilitate this, so that it is a two-way stream and where both countries really benefit from this.
In my opinion, one of the key sort of challenges for Myanmar in this period is capacity building, the issue of capacity and the issue of how to catch up comparing with other countries in the region. What Denmark could do to support or to increase the capacity level in Myanmar in different sectors?
I think part of our development cooperation, a very important part, will be capacity development. Whether it is training of lawyers or training of law students at universities, whether it's capacity building for local communities or for Department of Fisheries, there will be a huge element of capacity building in whatever we are doing. Then for me also, I think Myanmar is the least developed country, which will last for the next probably 6 to 8 years. That gives Myanmar some privileges. And I think it's very important that the new government and the companies take advantage of this. They have special access, for example, to the European market. And I think use these opportunities as long as they are there.
Countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, you are under the same roof here. When you work in the country, how do you coordinate, or do you coordinate in engaging with the Myanmar in all the sectors?
Let me first say that the building you're sitting in here is a joint Nordic House. And this is very much a pilot project. It is the first place in the world where we are working so much integrated as we do here. In this case, Norway are responsible for all the administration for all 4 countries. This is also a way of, making more efficient use of our resources. But of course, another aspect of it is that since we sit so closely together, we also talk together, we coordinate. Now, for example, on the Joint Peace Fund, we now have Denmark, Norway, and Finland as members of that. In other areas, we are working together. For example, Sweden and Denmark is working on the 3 Millennium Development Goals, the Health Fund, and there are many other examples where we are working together.
What could have been challenges for you in the last 5 years in the country when it comes to engaging with the government in power?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the past now.
Yes.
Of course, it was a situation which was quite delicate because, what we wanted was, of course, to support the transition, the reform process, the democratization process. And therefore, there was, until recently, relatively limited direct cooperation with the government. That has changed over the last couple of years, and now, of course, it will move forward. But of course, implementation constraints are there. The capacity, as you mentioned yourself. But I think, let's look forward now.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of possibilities. We have to be realistic, of course, and we also have to realize that things will not change from one day to the other. It will take time. And, I hope also my friends from Myanmar will realize that this is a process which will take time. So be patient, but not too patient.
Okay, so it is like with the cautious optimism, move forward,
Yes.
but one also should be cautious enough to face the challenges.
Because there are many challenges. I mean, we all know that Myanmar has many challenges I would say almost in all sectors, which stems very much from the past. So, where do you start and where do you end? You cannot do everything at the same time. So I think the new government, I'm sure, will also have to prioritize and say what their priorities are. For us, it's important to support these priorities to the extent that we can.
You've been here for a few years already in this country. What were your sort of highlights of and also the events that you remember and you enjoy the most so far?
Of course, the election day was very special.
You observed the election?
I observed it. I was down in the Yangon area, in the Muslim areas. I was out at a military barrack outside. And I think what was really fascinating was that people were very patient. It was very well organized, I would say, due to the fact that it was women to a large extent who were really in charge of the election. But it was a nice experience. I was in South Africa during the first elections in '94, and it was the same kind of feeling that suddenly, and you could feel people enjoyed that they have a chance to vote, and they all came out and showed that, they had their finger down in the ink. So I think this was very encouraging. But I would also say very recently, 2 weeks ago, I was in Rakhine. I've been there a lot. But I was in Sittwe, in some of the rural districts, and also in Mongdo. And we all know that there are a lot of challenges in Rakhine. But what was nice to see that in some areas, the Muslims and the Rakhine live together, work together, trade together. So, it's not all negative. There are also positive things. I talk with civil society organizations from both sides. They wanted, to rebuild trust, to rebuild relations. So, that was also nice experience which I want to share with you and others.
Yeah. You mentioned about South Africa. Allow me to ask about the issue of national reconciliation in Myanmar. What is your view on national reconciliation in Myanmar, comparing with countries like even South Africa?
Well, I think one have to be very, very clear that each country has its own history, and one should be careful not to take, experiences from other countries without knowing the specific context. I think Myanmar has a specific situation. You are in the middle of a transition, which I think hopefully will go very, very well. But for the time being, I think it's the transition, in my view, which of course is important. If you can combine this with national reconciliation, that would be fantastic. And I think this is what the new government would want to do.
Yeah. Is there anything you like to add for our readers and viewers?
Well, my basic view is that you can be very proud of your country. I think Myanmar has tremendous potential. And I also think that the people of Myanmar have decided, have made very clear which way you want to move forward. And I just wish that you will succeed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
sir,
very much.
for giving time for this interview. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.